All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode 334 for the week of April 14th. April 15th is tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. Tax time. If you have not gotten in, if you are listening to this afterward, it's probably a little too late. But as I learned one year, if you forget until October, the penalty is actually not that great. No matter what they kind of convince you of in terms of the dangers of filing on time. But anyhow, that's not why we're here to talk about your tax advice from Intuit and TurboTax. We are here to talk about video games. Joining me tonight is Tao Master. How are you, Tao?
Doing well, but I gotta go. I gotta go do my taxes now.
Oh no!
No, I've done them. They're already done.
That's good. That's good. And running the boards, as always, GameLogIQ. How are you, sir?
Good, man. Good.
Well, GameLogIQ, why don't you stay on the mic here? Because we're going to run right into our first segment, which is kind of our new games that we've been playing, or our main games that we've been playing. And you picked up something that there's been a demo out for a little while here on Switch and PlayStation, but it looks like maybe you didn't pick up the actual demo, but you picked up the full game. This is Unicorn Overlord. This is VanillaWare's tactics kind of ogre battle, spiritual kind of lineage. First off, how did you decide to pick up Unicorn Overlord? This feels, I mean, it's definitely not outside of your warehouse because of the tactics aspect, but it's been a couple weeks. I think it finally went on sale for $40 or so. Was that part of the impetus of picking it up?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think what I've noticed, and I'm glad you asked, because I was actually reflecting on this earlier this week, or maybe this weekend. I think what I've noticed is that as we turn the corner into each year, and we go through that whole, oh my God, we got to do a end of the year, game of the year kind of show, so November just gets bonga, with catch up and whatnot. And I think, the TGAs clear out of the windshield and, we go into the holidays. I think as I turn the corner into the new year, I'm always focused on like my backlog or kind of getting back to kind of ops normal kind of stuff. And so I just, as we did that this year, I just have been very obsessed with playing Call of Duty and some other things. But then kind of as we get into the spring, the FOMO starts building up, right? About the stuff that I like bypassed at the beginning of the year. So it kicked in and, I wanted to go back and start once again, the long, very long walk up through the summer. I think part of this was I was putting together, I'm still working on it, trying to put together another episode to talk about games. And so in order to do that, because one of the topics that I want to cover is the upcoming Ubisoft showcase, I've had to go back to Ubisoft's forward for 2023 and do a grade book check, right, on everything that they announced last year and what the status of it is. Did it come out? Did it get delayed? Did it get critical praise? How did it sell, et cetera? So I just started kind of going over the list of new games that have been out and decided I would start with Unicorn Overlord. I mean, I picked up a few things, but I pretty much picked them up, played them one time, and they immediately went to the backlog. So I did want to get into Unicorn Overlord and check it out. And you're right, it is very much kind of a wheelhouse game. I'm a huge fan of tactical RPGs. I like Final Fantasy Tactics. I was a big fan of Fallout Tactics. I like squad-based tactical games. I still need to go back and check out Jagged Alliance 3, which came out last year that I never got into. But a very interesting thing happened on the way to the grocery store, and this is not really your typical like squad-based tactics game or tactical RPG. And of course, I came to the Fire Emblem series late because I didn't really get that it was how tactical it was. But I'm a huge fan of that too. This is an auto battler. And one of the podcasts I was on last week, I said that like 3 times and stomped my foot, because the reviewers reviewing this game and all the headlines, like, that is not conveyed like, and it needs to be very loudly for, I think you have 2 people kind of coming to this game. You have JRPG fans, and then you're going to have tactical RPG fans. And if you're just a JRPG fan, you're fine, right? Gameplay can be whatever. I mean, JRPG fans, hopefully by this time, are used to, sometimes it's active time battle, sometimes it's turn-based, sometimes it's real time, right? So maybe they kind of get it, right? But if you're a hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool tactical RPG fan, like you come into this game and like the first time you go into battle and like everything just starts happening, you're like, oh, time out. Like I literally pause the game. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then I start digging and Googling around and find out that there's no way, because we're in the land where now I think RPGs that the mainstream market can pick up has like tailorable combat elements so that you can kind of scale it so it can go anywhere from kind of turn-based, even if it's faux turn-based, to real time. So like even in like Baldur's Gate 3, right, you can go in just like the old D&D games under the old, I can't remember what the engine was called, but where you could...
Yeah, like the Black Isle games, yeah.
Yeah, and KOTOR, I think KOTOR was a little like this too. Like you could pick and choose and turn off a lot of things that would cause it to pause, and the game would essentially run in almost real time. So that was a bit of a system shock. It doesn't necessarily make me dislike the game, like in and of itself. It just caught me off guard.
So as an auto battler, when I
ahead.
hear an auto battler, I'm thinking like Vampire Survivor, or kind of the auto battler aspect of Brotato and those types of survivor like games. But this is, you're setting up your units onto the battlefield. You're thinking about your composition and your unit kind of parity or counters. And then once they hit the battlefield, they kind of just run themselves.
Yeah. So you go in, before battles, you have a screen and you can do a few things. If you have units in proximity, you can hit swap and you can have a choice between like which unit actually engages the opposing unit in battle. Then you have an option to either engage in battle, organize units, use item, and I think there's like one other one. I think maybe there's like a utilize skill where like you can like cast a spell or something like that beforehand. I'm not exactly sure. But if you choose organize unit, then you have a squad. Like right now where I am, your squad could be a maximum of like 2 units. I think I just like hit a level up where I can choose to now expand that right to 3. So thanks a lot, Warwana. He's on board. Meant to cancel the search party. I'm here. So thanks a lot for joining in, Warwana. But you have a 6 square grid, and so you can position your units in any of those 6 squares. There are 3 front row and 3 back row, and that will make a tactical difference because, for instance, one of the big strengths of like a unit that's equipped with like a spear or a lance is that when they strike, they will hit any units that are directly right, in front of and behind each other, and they will pierce right through the front unit to the back unit. And so when you go into that organized units menu, you can swap equipment around that the unit has equipped. You can pick accessories. Typically, most units will have a laundry list of active and passive skills, and you can sort which one of those like are in priority. It's if you've ever tried to teach a child how to program software. Excuse me, and if you ever used like Scratch, it feels very much like Scratch. It feels like you're kind of assembling these logic blocks into a sequence of events that a robot is going to follow, essentially. So Lord Metroid has also arrived to the show, so thanks a lot, Lord Metroid. Thanks for joining up. And so, yeah, so you pick and pack like these logic blocks, essentially, and assemble them in a sequence of events. Then you can go in and there's a condition 1 and a condition 2 for each of those skills. And you can do things like prioritize armored units or prioritize flying units or only use this skill set on targets that are less than 75% HP or above 75% HP. So you have a lot of those things to tailor when those things fire as well. Not all of them make sense. Like sometimes there's a passive skill, and I mean it's a long laundry list. There's like 14, 15, somewhere between 14 and 18 like conditions, and then there's like another anywhere from 15 to like 28 like parameters to trigger that condition. A lot of them don't make sense. Like a lot of them you're like, why would I ever like not do that if this thing had happened? So there's a lot of gobbledygook. So I'm kind of waiting to see as I progress through the game to see if there's just a lot of kind of noise in those lists that are impractical and don't really make any sense and are just clutter. I would say that's part of the problem. I think, I can't remember, but on one episode here recently, like within the last 4, I think I talked about cognitive workload on things like a pilot in an aircraft, and like if you give them too much to do or give them too much stuff in their face, then it takes them longer to make a decision, right? Because if you give somebody 5 levers to pull, it takes them longer to make a decision on which of those 5 to pull, rather than if you give them 3 levers to pull, right? So I'm waiting to see if there's a lot of that, and there's not a lot that's explained, right? So you get all of these things, and first of all, some of them are not very intuitive on what they on how they how they're described. There's a lot of things that are described like if you assign this condition, then they will only ever use that skill if there are armored characters on the screen, right? And I'm like, well, in an event like okay, if you give me like a combined arms unit, right, and there's some armored characters and some infantry, like I would understand you saying, hey, prioritize, but like I would hope that like if the character has an offensive skill, they wouldn't just stand there and do nothing, if there weren't this type of. So some of the things, like I said, don't make sense. And some of the things aren't very intuitively described. So I'm just kind of waiting to see. And then, I mean, it's like a 15-hour game, and
15 hours only?
Yeah, I think it's 15 hours.
That sounds really low compared to what I've heard. But
yeah, I thought if you mainline the campaign, I may be confused with some other thing that I looked up. It's how long to beat, so I'll look that up. I know people have spent like a ton of time in it, but I think you have a ton of options, right, in how you want to pursue getting around the game. So, I mean, I'm having fun with it, but I also don't really kind of want to dally. And so therefore, I'm not super interested in taking the risk on fighting a battle and arming some condition where I'm not exactly certain what behavior I'm going to get out of the bot. So, for me, I'm just experimentation is I'm discouraged to experiment. So we'll just kind of have to see how it goes. I do really like the almost 4X kind of nature of it, and I think that's part of the reality too, is the strategic part of the game. It's a lot like kind of if you've played like the Rome Total Wars, or over the last few years, there's been this big increase of the design influence where you are given some level of strategic control over a map. And then, I think the Total War series kind of brought a lot of that to the fore. And then you zoom in and you can actually play the combat if you want to. Or you could skip the combat and just say, just auto, like, let it do that. So there's I think in its design and aesthetic, this game almost gives you more depth in the strategic part of it than it really does in the tactical. To the point where, like, I'm in chapter 4 now. I'm kind of in like my first major area where it's really giving me the freedom to really make decisions. And there was a point where I had captured 2 kind of places where I could garrison, and then you can also garrison at bridges. And so I had captured a bridge also. But then from the bridge, the natural kind of vector of the tutorial is to kind of make you hyper-focus on just maneuvering one unit at a time. But once I had locked down those 2 garrison points and then the bridge, I like looked at my main HQ, which was all the way in the rear, and I was like, huh, given where I am, nobody can get past me to get to my main HQ, right? Because I think the stage, the tutorial, it kind of told you that it was game over if that ever gets captured. And I was like, well, I don't need to just maneuver this one unit down to the southwest. I can go ahead and take a second unit and go ahead and maneuver them over to the east, right, and pursue both of those vectors of offensive like concurrently. So at that point I started getting like a little bit of like the Civ 6 vibe, a little bit of Age of Wonders, you know, a little bit of these things where you're sortying and maneuvering, you know, multiple units around the field in different vectors, executing on different parts of a strategy. And at that point I was like, oh, there's really a little bit more to like the map strategy here than just the tactics. The tactics are kind of, oh, by the way, why bother, kind of thing. So I'm waiting to see if there's going to be, you know, more depth to the tactics. Right now, the tactics really feel like a lot like I kind of talk about that age of Gran Turismo that I couldn't stand, which was just raw horsepower, and you were only going to win a race if you had more horsepower than the other guy. I kind of feel like that, like it's all just a matter of HP and DP, you know, the DPS equivalent, right? Damage and HP, and as long as you have that, then you always beat like the other unit. There is really no Hail Mary, you know, so to speak. Although I think there is actually a skill called Hail Mary in the list. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much the main summary. Like a few hours into it now, there's a lot that's not intuitive. Where I'm sure if I Googled, I would figure a lot of it out. But B, I'm also not convinced that I really need to at the tactical level. Like I said, it may just be a matter of, you know, rock, paper, scissors. But the strategic elements of it are kind of more, you know, what's pertinent. I think, you know, from what I've seen and played so far.
Yeah, from what I remember hearing from others on podcasts, like the battles themselves are not drastically difficult. Like it is more of the leveling and the kind of pairing up with things. So, and yeah, Wara's comment here in terms of the gambit system, the way you described it, in terms of setting up scenarios and how your rest of your party interacts, certainly feels like similar to that gambit system. Looking at how long to beat, main story is about 40 hours. Main story and side quests about 50, 55. So the way you're describing it sounds really engaging from like a strategy game aspect. My question is, the way you're also describing it feels like it's a game that will be tough to come back to if you put it down for a couple weeks and try to remember how to play it the next time it comes back around in your cycle. You know, do you feel like you've got enough of a grasp to put it into your regular rotation, or is it something that you're going to need to spend a little more time on in order to really grasp those systems to be able to come back to it at some point in time?
I don't know that I mean, that's a little bit of kind of what I'm saying. I need to see some more of it to kind of sift through. Like, I don't know, like, I just don't know how much more complex it really is, that there really will be to it. And I apologize that I was way off on the hours. I don't know. I was looking at some other game this week. You know, I looked up how long to beat, but that's like the only new thing in my rotation. So I'm not sure what I was looking at. Not
a reason to apologize. More of like, if you picked it up because you thought, oh, this is going to be a short game and I can finish it in less than 10 hours.
Yeah,
it's a whole different piece.
Yeah, no. But like I said, I don't know that it's going to present that much complexity. So I'm not too worried about putting it down and shoving it in the backlog. I mean, it doesn't explain that much to you now, so I don't know that I'm going to be that bothered if I pick it back up and like there's not a lot of explanation there. So, you know, we'll just have to see. Like I said, I think it's almost more about the strategic war of maneuver at the strategic level than it really is about the unit to unit, you know, rock, paper, scissors effort, you know, effect of it. Right. Like that's how I feel right now. But like, again, we'll have to see how that goes. I don't have magical characters right now. Like you're given kind of some units at the very beginning when you're kind of doing the tutorial part where I don't want to give the story where you have some more powerful units, but then that's kind of taken away from you. So, you know, at that point, like I saw magical characters, I saw characters who could like throw spears. You know, there are some defensive things that talk about, you know, defending against arrows and things like that. One of the things that I'm particularly bothered by, like again, I go back to this lack of explanation, and one of the things I'm particularly bothered by is like on a couple of my characters, I see kind of like a laundry list of skills, but like at one point only 2 of them are selectable, and I'm like, and one of them is like a melee blocking capability, and like all the enemies that I'm running into are melee, but the only skill I can select right now is one where he blocks arrows, and I'm like, I'm not running into any archers right now. Why could I not select the skill that would allow me to block melee? So, I'm still kind of, working through things like that. I'm resisting the urge to Google, but I'm probably going to hit that point sometime during the week. But other than that, I'm having pretty decent fun with it now. It is a JRPG in terms of story, and there are some really long vocal sequences. And I'm just, but fortunately I've been able to stay awake through those, so I haven't fallen asleep yet.
That's good. That's a good sign. Yep.
So we'll just have to see how it goes.
No, Vanillaware has done some really good stories. A couple years ago, remember their 13 Sentinels was good there. Yes, and Lord Metroid, I agree with you in terms of Muramasa, originally on Wii and then out on PlayStation. I still have it installed on a PS Vita card somewhere because it is nice, kind of side-scrolling. And Olden Sphere is one of those that was originally a PlayStation 2 game and then got a remaster out on PlayStation 4. Great art design, always really solid in terms of its art design and some systems. This is the first time that they've dug into this layer of strategy. There was some strategy with 13 Sentinels, but this feels a little bit different here as well. Tao, any questions, comments on Unicorn Overlord?
I think the thing that makes me crankiest, and I have seen, the news threads that have come by, is obviously this is a game that it would be incredibly well suited for the PC. It would be a great game to play on the Steam Deck, but it's not there, and apparently Vanillaware has zero intention of putting it on PC. So, which apparently is a patch stick of theirs. So it is what it is. It is available on the Xbox Series as well as the Nintendo Switch, and so. Yep. In hindsight, I've kind of looked at it and I'm like, man, maybe I should have picked this up for Switch.
Although I'm sure the art design really sings in 4K on a PlayStation 5 though too. So, Tao, you've been playing something new, but is it really new? So, Ark Survival Ascended, is this the new engine for Ark Survival?
Yeah, it's the remastered, basically just a remaster of Ark Survival Survival Evolved. So they're using the Unreal 5 engine now, and it shows. It's a very beautiful game. So much so that actually, so I played it on my Xbox Series X, and I played it on PC, and I actually had lower the graphics settings on my PC because I was like, "Whoa, it's not running all too well." But that could also be the game because I know it was never really super optimized, even the old game. So I don't know. It's been, I think, came out in October originally of last year. So it's been a few months. You'd figure they'd be able to get it going, but I did have to lower pretty much everything in there just to get it to run decently, which is fine. It still looks fine. It still looks great. So it's a nice fresh coat of paint on the graphics. I haven't gotten too deep into it. I probably played a couple hours maybe so far. Just trying to get a base, like a small base set up. I'm trying to wall off an area now, so I don't have dinosaurs, coming in and destroying my stuff when I'm not online because I'm just playing on the official servers right now. So it's always up. But
so from what I remember you talking about Ark before, the always up piece means that somebody can come in. I mean, does it have the kind of Rust aspect of somebody can come in and invade your space, or?
Yeah, so there is
isolated.
So you can search for PvP or PvE server. So I just did PvE because I don't want to deal with the PvP stuff. Not in a game like this. Like the same thing like I mentioned about Rust. It's like unless you have like a big group of players, you're pretty much going to be dead, pretty quickly. So I just doing the PvE right now. Which I mean, people can still kind of troll you a little bit. They can lure dinosaurs and have them aggro on them, and then they just run around your base, and then they'll start attacking the base because they're trying to get to that person. But I haven't really seen that too much though. Even back in when I was playing Ark Survival Evolved. So hopefully it doesn't happen this time either. But you never know. But then just random dinosaurs will kind of come in. They'll sense you or whatever. I don't know how, but and start attacking your base also. So that's why I want to get my big walls up around my base. But so if you don't know what it is, Survival Evolved is just you kind of wake up on an island. You don't know what's going on. There's a little bit of a story now. So because it's been a while since I started like a new server, even back on Survival Evolved. But there's like a little bit of an animated cutscene, like when you first start off before you wake up on the island. So kind of gives you a little bit of backstory and a story. Because when I first started the original one, there was like just kind of notes and stuff you find around the world, like trying to figure out what's going on. But it looks like there's like actual, cutscenes and stuff that they've put into the game now. So other than the graphical settings, it's really the only thing I've really noticed so far is a little bit of a UI improvement. It was a little bit of a mess before. I shouldn't say a mess, but it was just kind of convoluted. But it looked like they've tightened some things up, so it looks pretty nice actually right now. So actually, there's one weird thing. So the original one, you started off in first person, but in this one, for some reason, you start off in third person, and that kind of threw me off. So I just wasn't used to playing it like that. So finally, I was able to figure out how you can change it back and forth if you want to. It's a little you kind of have to a couple menu presses, and you get into it. It's not as simple as say like PUBG, where it's just like one button press to switch back and forth. And it's kind of like that No Man's Sky too. But I guess on PC you can you can set that up to just switch back and forth. Unfortunately, you can't really do that on Xbox controller or Xbox, because even on PC, I'm playing on the Xbox controller just because I don't know, it's more natural for me to play a game like that, especially when I'm building this stuff. It seems like a little bit more. I got a little bit more control that I can do with the sticks. So I think I mentioned that before with Minecraft and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty, like I said, pretty much the old game with a new sheen to it. But I know still early on, so I don't know what else has changed so far.
So you played if I remember right, you played the first one some with your son as well. Have you kind of done any co-op yet together?
No, not yet. I think he saw me. He was watching me play the other day. Because he's like, "What is that? Like, why does it look different?" Like, because he saw it was Ark, obviously, because dinosaurs and the jungle setting. But I was like, "Oh yeah, this is the new one," which he knew about. And he's like, "Oh okay," but he didn't seem too interested. But he kind of like me too. He'll just kind of come and go on games. So I'm sure in a few months or even less, maybe he'll want to jump back into it, and so we'll play together. So I'm not too worried about it. It's it's one of those games like Minecraft once again where I can jump in and out of it, so it's not a big deal. And usually when we play together, he'll one of us will just make the game, so we don't have to worry about being on a server or anything like that. But we'll see what happens.
Nice. Yeah, I thanks everybody who's joining in. Hero Down Under, glad to have you here as well. Now, I've never played Ark, but I did find myself watching the first episode of the Ark animated series on Paramount, which, as you were talking about, like the story aspect or the intro cutscene pieces there. So, yes, but I did not get past the first episode. But this week, I pretty much got through all 8 episodes of the Fallout TV show on Amazon, and that sucked up a whole lot of my game playing time. But it also made me want to go back and play some Fallout, or at least wander around and play some Fallout, right? I think Fallout 3, I know that I had it on Games for Windows Live back when that was a thing in the late 2000s. Fallout New Vegas definitely played some time with after it got patched and a little more stable. So it was got it installed on my Steam Deck and playing a little bit there as well. Yes, Maura, I agree. It's a adaptation done right, in your opinion. Yes, I think it is as well. It is not trying to take the story of the game. It is taking the setting of the game, which I think gives a lot more. I mean, the Fallout world itself and the source book and the different iterations of it over the course of time, whether it's the isometric ones or the Bethesda ones, there's a lot of in-universe potential there, or at least kind of a foundation to build from. And so I think they do a good job. My only at this point, my biggest issue is like is going to end in a cliffhanger, and I want more. I don't want to stop, right? Like the nice thing about a Fallout game is you could keep wandering through the wasteland and keep on going. Lord Metroid, yes, the show is kind of gory, but I mean, so is playing Fallout 3 with VATS, right? Like it feels appropriate in that way. Like it fits the setting. And maybe I will freely admit that maybe I'm a little desensitized to it after coming off of Invincible in terms of gore. But it does feel like it fits within the kind of limb exploding aspect that VATS creates. And even early on in the show, you get kind of a slow motion aspect there as well. So Fallout has hit some news this week as well, not only having the release of the TV show, but we get an announcement from Bethesda that they're coming with a next-gen patch to provide 4K and 60 frames per second for Fallout 4. And GameLogIQ, you've got our first news story of the night, which takes us into another Fallout-related story. That was a segue for you, GameLogic.
Yeah, no, you caught me off guard a little bit. I thought you were going to take a little longer. Because the other thing I was going to mention is there's also new content in the Fallout game. So a couple of the games, I think Fallout 76 and maybe some others.
Yes, yep, 76 had some additional content
DLC.
Drop. Yep.
Yeah, like you could have like the actress's gun and things like that.
Yeah, they're definitely kind of doing some cross promotional and cross media marketing there between the two of them. Yep.
Yep. And I was thinking at the time while you were briefing that to wishlist Fallout 76 because that's been one that I've been meaning to get around to that launched to not great reception, but has
it seems kind, right?
Yeah,
it was kind of janky. Even so much we had the Todd Howard letter of please help us test this to improve it as a paid box product. Yep.
Yeah, and it has slowly walked its way back to, I think it's mostly positive rating now. It's at like 75% recent and 71% overall of Steam reviews. So it's kind of like the No Man's Sky of the Fallout franchise, if you want. I've been watching that march back, and I've been meaning to pick it up. So now is a good time to list it. It's down to $7.99 on Steam. But over on Eurogamer, this story, Fallout has more than doubled its player counts on Steam. This story by Vicky Blake, and a quote, Fallout has more than doubled its concurrent players on Steam following the release of Amazon Prime's blockbuster TV series. Despite approaching almost a decade old, Fallout 4 is currently sitting in SteamDB's top 20 games by concurrent numbers, making it one of the most popular games on Steam this weekend. But it's not just Fallout 4 that's seen a resurgence in players. Fallout 76 and Fallout New Vegas have similarly seen their concurrent player base increase since the TV series debuted on the streaming channel last week. So, couple notes for me on this. Number one, we've seen this before. We've seen this with whatever the thing was that was the not League of Legends, but I can't keep track of all the Riot games that are out. But
yeah, the Arcane when the animated series released on Netflix. Yep.
Yeah. We've seen this with the Cyberpunk 2077 show. We've seen this with The Witcher. We've definitely seen this with The Last of Us. And, I'll say it always begs the question when the associated game is getting remastered or DLC or an expandable or something that the company is asking people to pay for, and they go, why are they bothering with this? Nobody wants this. Why are they asking us to pay for it? Well, guys, because when these shows come back, the games suddenly get more notice because you have and the reason why the companies do this, if you listen to their earnings calls, I mean, you read their strategy documents. The reason companies are doing this is because it is in a time when the industry is challenged for growth. The statement is that when they do these, they expose non-gamers to the IP, and then those people sometimes go, oh, there's a game behind that because they hear that via word of mouth from their friends, and they decide that, oh, well, maybe I want to go check it out. There's literally people with the Last of Us series. There are literally people who went out and bought PlayStation 5s after watching the TV show. Those people will now, over a rather long period of time, will now be buying Sony products. So there's a reason why. So it's good, for the Fallout series. To be quite honest, I just never I enjoy the Fallout games. I am not a Fallout stan. They're not like in my list of like favorite games ever. Not because I felt like they were bad games, but typically because they've just been too big, and I've just never had that much time, right, to be bothered with them. I shouldn't say to be bothered with them. They're not really in that category of stuff that I don't want to be bothered with, but they're like just really big games, and it's been that way. My first Bethesda game was Morrowind on the original Xbox, and I got really offended by all the walking around, and I just never kind of went back. I've gone back for some retro plays like long after those games have come out. I've really enjoyed them when I've played them. But I just didn't really pay that much attention to this whole television series thing, and so, it's a good knock for them. Tao, have you had a chance to watch any of the episodes, or is it kind of on your to watch list at any point?
Just about finished with the very first episode. I think that first episode was like an hour and 15 minutes, 20 minutes, kind of long. I don't know if they're all that long.
No, they vary quite a bit. Like I thought,
Okay.
yeah, the first episode is probably one of the longer. Most of them hit that kind of 50-minute mark. You end up with a couple that felt relatively short because they were down in like 40 minutes. So it does vary a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've had my ups and downs with the series. I think I've mentioned in the past, like Fallout 3. I fell off pretty hard, pretty quickly, just because of the drab environments. I didn't really like the gunplay either too much. But then I did pick up 4. I played that quite a bit, and actually I was thinking of going back to playing 4 again. Now that I'm watching the series, so they got me again.
Right, like it's.
But I already have it, so it's
kind of.
I'm just gonna pick it up,
bringing you back into those universes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that one kind of seemed a little bit more down my alley too, because they had the base building and the going around those worlds, and like in the first one and picking up everything was you didn't have to do that. But this one, or in 4 I should say, there was actually a reason to do that. I think you could recycle stuff or use it for crafting and stuff like that. So there's too many games at the time, and like there is now, and so I kind of just fell off of it and was playing something else, or I'm sure something pulled me away, like Call of Duty, or maybe I don't think I was playing Fortnite at the time, so probably Call of Duty. So, but I'd like to go back to that one and give it another shot. So,
yeah, that would have been what, fall of 2015 sounds about right. So Fortnite pre-Fortnite, even Defend the World or whatever the Save the World, as it was originally released as. So let's move on to our next news story here. Bethesda games have not always been greatly optimized for PC. And while this next news story is not about Bethesda, it is about some game engines. And we've got NVIDIA issuing some GeForce information. Tao, you want to, or GameLogIQ, this one is yours.
Yeah, so it's definitely a week while, so NVIDIA just had kind of their big release of iterative GPUs at the beginning of the year. They brought out their Super Series cards. But now things are kind of quiet, and they are going to be probably until the end of the year. If some of the leaks are true and NVIDIA releases their 5000 series cards, I think AMD is also going to release their 8000 series cards this year. So we're kind of in a lull until then, and it's always a great time for companies to play. I don't know what I would call the game, but the game is the blame game, and we sometimes see this infrequently. A lot of times, like, companies are wary about casting blame on, say, AMD, or wary about casting blame on Intel. But often, sometimes companies get backed into a corner, and they're kind of like, well, if company A is not going to deal with this, we're people are going to assume that we're to blame, and so we're going to put something out. So NVIDIA issues important message to GeForce GPU and Intel CPU owners. This story on PC Games N by Samuel Willits. Having a harmonious relationship between your processor and graphics card is essential for smooth performance, but some PCs equipped with Intel CPUs are reportedly generating errors that look as though they're problems with graphics cards, but appear to be down to the CPU instead. The issues are so prevalent, in fact, that NVIDIA has chimed in with some direction for affected users. Despite 13th and 14th gen Intel Core processors being some of the best gaming CPUs on the market today, these chips are now at the center of an investigation into some NVIDIA GPU instabilities. So if your PC is rocking a blue-green component combo, listen up. So the story basically goes on, and I mean, this story talks about the combination of NVIDIA and Intel. I've actually seen news stories that basically say the super high-end Core i9 processors, 13th and 14th gen for Intel, have proven to be problematic with certain games in terms of stability, regardless of what GPU that you have. And so, this story goes on to refer to kind of, if you ever saw 1989 Batman with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, there was the whole thing of the Joker had poison makeup and toiletry products, but they were only in certain combinations that they would kill you. So it's like you weren't supposed to use like deodorant and soap, the same day, things like that. And that's kind of what this is. It's like if you have a Core i9 14th generation and you're playing an Unreal Engine 5 game and you have an NVIDIA GPU, then watch out. I would just say if you're on a Core i9 processor, 13th or 14th gen, you may just be having issues. And you may need to go dig into this article and take some of the measures that they talk about. I will also go on to say, I mean, yes, Intel's getting a black eye now, but AMD has had the same problem. And actually, I think I was exposed to it just in the last recent weeks because I'm pretty sure what was going on with my number one gaming rig, with some of the Call of Duty stuff that I was experiencing is AMD Ryzen 7 processors, or maybe, I think definitely the 7 processors, suffer from this thing where sometimes when you get a Windows update and or a GPU driver update, the PBO, which is like performance, I can't remember what it's called, but it's an underlying like overclocking automation, will flip itself on. And on certain motherboards, the vendors are turning it on by default and you don't know. And they often have like really esoteric settings in the BIOS menu, like auto, which sometimes may actually mean off, but sometimes it might actually mean on. You have to dig into the documentation and find out. So, both of these, I was talking to Brap, earlier this week, and, what we've seen over time is we've seen, you go back to the Pentium 4 days and it was the megahertz wars, and Intel and AMD went back and forth over megahertz, and eventually gigahertz, right? And it was just the clock cycle wars. And then those things kind of settled down. And then sometimes we get the efficiency wars. And now we're in and it's been a core war since Ryzen came out. It's like these guys keep, propagating and inflating the number of cores and hyperthreads you have, and like to a point where, and yes, I'm an enthusiast, I'm going to buy the stuff. But great Scott, like your average PC person does not need 32 threads, right? We have 60 core processors with hyperthreading available now, or a hyperthreading equivalent, and most people just don't need it. So, and then, and unfortunately also with Paul's Gaming Live and I were looking at a chart earlier this week. And, part of the problem with this particular chip with the 14th gen Core i9 processor is that I think it's like default power draw is something like almost 300 watts. Like it's TDP is just like through the roof. Why? Because now we're in a clock core power draw war, right? So, hopefully these things will kind of settle out, but, when you're, and I have two enthusiast cores now. I have a Ryzen, I keep wanting to say 5, but it's not a 5. I have a Ryzen 9 5950X and a Ryzen 9 7950X. And, I'm just at the point now where, I do things like I'm not putting anything less than a 360 millimeter AIO in a box anymore, because when I've put a 240 millimeter AIO, like, you're just understand when you get these parts, pair them with the right power supply, obviously the right cooling solution, but, in almost every, it's kind of like the Slayer, right? In almost every generation, right, of chips, there's going to be some wonky chip that has heat or power problems like this. So when these warnings come out, make sure you kind of throttle them down, keep them at their defaults, don't let them run away, and take a pause, right, with some of the kind of games that they have some problems with. I don't personally feel this is like a major black eye to Intel, such that people are going to be scared away from Intel. Like I said, Asus had a motherboard problem last year that they had to get out in front of and get under control. AMD has had its problems. AMD had major problems with the 7000 series GPUs that came out. So there were problems with the 4090 RTX cards with their 12-volt high power connectors, to the point that I still won't buy a 4090. You know, when I had my chance to go high, I went with a 4080, and I said I'm just not taking the risk of going to a 4090. So, you know, read the public service announcements that are out there, you know, and you just stay away. And if you've already built and you're already on one of these chips, you know, like I said, learn what you need to do to kind of put a cooling blanket on the thing until things settle out.
Right. Thanks. That's a helpful, but also a realistic kind of landscape of where we're at. And Nate, thanks for the comment as well as we go through. Tao, you've got the next story here. We are moving into some EA and some Battlefield news. We had Battlefield and DICE announce that that Battlefield, what is it, 2042, 24? Yeah. Is heading into kind of a maintenance mode. This is their last season. But we also get a little bit of developer shakeup in terms of who's moving over to help out the next Battlefield.
Yeah, so along with obviously DICE and Criterion and Ripple Effect, they're going to be pulling in Motive Studios, who, if you don't know what they've done recently, they've done Star Wars Squadron and the Dead Space remake recently. So they're going to be pulling them in to get a team together to focus on helping DICE and all these other studios make the next Battlefield, which they haven't really said what that is going to be, you know, future, past, present, who knows. But basically, I'm trying to find the guy here. The general manager, Patrick Klaus, said that Dead Space remake creative director Roman Campos Aurelia and executive producer Philip Ducharme will build that team to work alongside Vincent Zampella, which I completely forgot that he's in charge of the DICE now, or those studios, and Brian Bede to work on the next Battlefield. So I just thought it was kind of interesting. Like they're starting to go to that, you know, Call of Duty and, you know, kind of Ubisoft, just bringing in, you know, as many studios as I can, I guess, and just trying to get Battlefield and you know, all these other games just, you know, up to snuff. So it's just kind of interesting. And I know Criterion, that's because they were the former was it Burnout or one of the racing games?
Yeah, they were Burnout, then brought in under EA's banner for Need for Speed, and kind of trading off with Ghost Games at that point. They did some of the space battling within Battlefront 2, which Motive did the story campaign for, and then they were brought in on continue on with Battlefield as well.
Okay, yeah. So I wonder if Motive will maybe go story route, or like it doesn't really say what they're going to do, obviously, because they're still trying to build the team. So, and then Ripple Effect, I was going to look that up, but I didn't get a chance to. Do you know what they've done, or are they more just like a supportive studio?
I'd have to look them up as well. The name is not familiar, which makes me think they're probably more of a support studio.
Okay, yeah, I didn't recognize the name either when I saw it. So, but yeah, so we get those 4 studios now working on the next Battlefield. So obviously, like I said, no name, no when it's going to come out or anything like that. So I'm sure it's kind of a ways off, since 42 is what, 2 years old now, I believe, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, probably fall of 22. Sounds about right.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens coming up with that. Oh, and I'm sorry. The other thing on the story too, because I completely forgot about this, that the Motive is also working on that Iron Man game that they said is still going on. So they're still working on that, and it's one of their important priorities in the studio. So we'll see that coming out at some point also.
Yeah, Ripple Effect has made even a support for expansions, maps, things like that. Yep. I think the sad, sweet, funny irony of this all is, right, like the first Dead Space developer with Visceral was taken off of Dead Space and put onto Battlefield to make Hardline, and now the Motive as the Dead Space remake developer is taken off of Dead Space to be put onto Battlefield to do what yet? But from an IP perspective, for as much as the most recent Battlefield has struggled, or even the last 2 Battlefields have struggled, I could see where EA is trying to shore up that IP in terms of however they launch it next.
And of course, what happened to Visceral?
Visceral no longer exists. So, yes.
Yeah, so part of the tale of the tape is, EA Motive to me is kind of the redheaded stepchild studio. Like I can't remember. I think
you're right. You want to say Amy Hennig was brought in to
right.
be kind of story driven. Yes.
Well, was she at Visceral?
Maybe, but I want to.
I think so. I think the way the story goes.
Motive.
Jade Raymond was she was put in charge of Motive at startup. So I think the way the story goes is Hennig was at Visceral. Visceral had its Star Wars game canceled. Hennig left. A lot of the developers from Visceral were absorbed into EA Motive while Jade Raymond was head.
Yes.
But part of the problem at Motive, hearsay, was that when and EA Motive, it's a thing where like they're never all like on one project. So when you have things like the Visceral people coming in, projects shifting around at EA Motive, you get teams who are on a stride, and then you get intermixed DNA, and then you have people starting to have problems. So it one of the things that I read some breadcrumbs on is people got cranky at EA Motive, and some of the leads and executives left, and then Jade Raymond left, right, and went to Stadia. So I think part of the problem is, like I said, EA Motive has just never really had like a big thing where like all of them have been on it, where they've owned it. They've constantly, they were asked to take on the Visceral people. It's just kind of been a problem now. And this interconnects to things that we've talked about this year, where we, part of this now goes back to Ridgeline Studios and how the first founder left in January, and then the second founder left in February, and then there were huge layoffs, and now that studio is shut down. In the mix of all that, one of the questions we asked on this show is, what do you do now, Vince Zampella? And part of our response was, well, we don't know. We're super interested to see how he's going to handle what's going on with Battlefield. And now we're starting to get our answers. And so a couple of weeks ago, we reported on Criterion being handed the series from Ridgeline. Now you see EA Motive being brought in, Ripple Effect being brought in. Part of this also connects to the guys over on the DPS podcast, so mutuals of mine, Slow-Mo and Gaming Forte, talked about how, during the Activision acquisition, the head of EA, Andrew Wilson, said, we think this is actually good for the industry. We look at this as an opportunity for EA. And we think what he was referring to was that, hey, PlayStation has been funneling all this marketing money to Activision for Call of Duty, and now they're not. They're certainly not going to be giving that money to Microsoft. Okay, so now they're going to be looking for places to put that money. Maybe we should mount up some effort and have them, cajole them to put that money towards Battlefield. And so a lot of what's going on now kind of has the look, feel, and smell around it of what? The Call of Duty production machine, which is this large, supersized, MCU-like, 10-studio, 1,200 developer, largest production pipeline assembled in the industry. And it looks and smells and feels like EA is trying to do the same thing. Have Vince Zampella in charge of like this whole thing, which sounds scarily like the way Johanna Fares was general manager of the whole Call of Duty series, right? And Johanna Fares wasn't the first, other people had been in charge of it before, but she was like the most recent one that I was aware of. So, but one of the things that we're going to see that's interesting in this dynamic is when Zampella, and I forget his partner's name, left, I think because new leadership got brought into Infinity Ward, I think Infinity Ward eventually learned how to share its Rice Krispies with Treyarch and Sledgehammer. I don't know that we're going to see that from DICE. What I don't know is, it seemed like when EA tried to make everybody use Frostbite, there were definitely some problems at DICE with supporting Frostbite. And other studios were cranky because, as I talked about and as I would expect, People pick up the phone, they try and call DICE just like you would try and call Epic when you needed tech support for Unreal. And of course, the problem at DICE is the guy who's the expert on Frostbite is also working on the next Battlefield, and that guy's manager is at a cubicle 2 down, right? And when that guy hears you on the phone for more than 12 minutes, right, he comes over and says, hey, I need you to go finish working on that Jeep model, right? Let Tiburon, right, or let, Iala or whoever, like, figure that out on their own. You've helped them enough. And I've always said in a corporate structure like that, where you're going to try and make a toolkit common, like, you cannot do that. Like, you have to break that support structure away from a studio where they're working on other projects, because, like I said, that manager is always going to say, hey, what's my priority today? My priority for you today is not supporting somebody else, right? My priority today is on you supporting me. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how this whole dynamic plays out, because the cultures are inherently different, and cultures don't change quickly. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out.
Yeah, I think that's a nice piece of analysis there, GameLogic. Thank you. In terms of the challenge of blending those cultures, or even just aligning with a single direction, will be a challenge with this many studios trying to spin up and focus on whatever Battlefield becomes. GameLogIQ, you are back on the mic for our next news story. This is another game studio related news story, and this one is around Avalanche Studios, and this is Avalanche Studios of Just Cause. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I did a deep dive on this and a longer write-up than it was kind of dealt with here at Engadget. And yes, that is one of the things that I covered at the end of that. Avalanche Studios should not be confused with Avalanche Software. Avalanche Software is owned by WBIE, or Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment. They're responsible for Hogwarts Legacy and some other not so good games. They did a really good job with Hogwarts. Their pedigree is not as illustrious as that. Avalanche Studios is the developer behind the Just Cause series. So this story over on Engadget. Avalanche Studio devs have reached a contract agreement. The story by Lawrence Bonk. Late last year, over 100 employees of Avalanche Studios, the makers of Just Cause, announced an intent to unionize. The workers have officially ironed out a collective bargaining agreement with the Swedish labor unions, Unionen and Engineers of Sweden. The agreement goes into effect during the second quarter of 2025. While specifics of the agreement remain unknown, Avalanche said that it will help standardize frameworks around essential areas such as salaries, benefits, employee influence, and career support. The company says it's working closely with both unions to ensure a smooth implementation of those frameworks. So as I mentioned, I did a deeper dive on this. So a few things. So unionization in the Nordic countries is much more commonplace than it is in the West and in the United States in particular. It is kind of the norm there, and it's kind of the baseline. There are unions established for individual trades and sectors. And so typically, if you go into a given, whatever, trade or sector you go into, there is typically a union already in place there. In the gaming industry, however, in the Nordic countries, they're much further behind than most of the other, members of industry. One of the things about THQ, and one of the kind of cautionary tales that I wrote about this is, I don't want to say that the articles kind of made a big hoopla of 100 people, right? But Avalanche is a company. So first of all, they're a studio group. They're a studio composed of multiple locations. They have offices in Stockholm, Malmo, Sweden, New York, Montreal, and a fifth one. I can't remember exactly where it is. But they have in excess of 500 employees, about 534. About 400 plus of those are in Europe. And there are around 90 in Stockholm and some additional amount in Malmo. I'm not sure exactly how many. But a lot of those employees in Stockholm are executives and members of management, because that's the HQ. So, just kind of getting a feel of what this 100 people are. Number one, it's 100 people in the Nordic region where unions are commonplace. So it's not necessarily that this is indicative of some like major unionization effort around the entirety of the studio group, right? This is a thing where the normal part of the labor and corporate culture in a geographic region, that office in an industry that is really historically behind is really trying to align with more of the norm. So these union agreements are only going to impact the employees in Sweden, not the rest of Avalanche Studios. So the timeline, I think a lot of people will kind of react to, oh my God, it's so late. So number one, what is Avalanche Studios working on? We don't know entirely, but one thing that we do know that they're working on is they're working on Contraband, which is a 1970s era kind of heist oriented, feels like it's like, maybe Ocean's 11 in a GTA kind of setting. That game was announced at the summer showcase of 2021, back when we used to do a thing called E3, or at least it had come back for its one time, which is no more. It is an Xbox exclusive, and we have not heard anything official about that game since then. But they are still working on it. Their press release from their 20th anniversary, which was just last month, the studio started in 2003. They just had... a press release from last year, I think, in April, talked about how the team is still working on Contraband. This was just after they had made their acquisition of a studio in Montreal, and really kind of opened. Then, like, that CEO for that studio is now like the head of their Montreal division. Monster Closet in Montreal was who they picked up. So one of my theories is that that game, which does not have a launch date, or like I said, there's been nothing that we heard of, is probably due in 2025. What would not be good would be for you to onboard into a labor agreement in the Nordic region, which is incredibly complex and resets the baseline on your whole interrelationship between workers and management, and have that disrupt a project pipeline and timeline for a project that you have not paid for. Xbox is paying for that. So probably a good idea for you to maybe not close on that until after that game has been delivered. Fingers crossed that game shows up on time. In addition to Just Cause, Avalanche has also worked on Mad Max, which they did in 2015. They actually did the sequel to Rage, which was done by id. So in 2019, they released Rage 2, which was published by Bethesda Softworks. Another thing that, and this, I think maybe people caught wind of this or maybe got a better understanding of this when Just Cause 4 came out. But another thing that they do is, it's kind of funny because I just talked about Frostbite. They make this thing called the Apex Open World Engine, which is kind of a common engine and tool set that a lot of their studios use, right? Kind of as a common engine, just like Frostbite, just like Snowdrop for Ubisoft, which is actually done by Massive, but then is used by several other studios. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this goes down. Other good write-ups on this, I would really read. The Engadget is kind of a good starter, but Rebecca Valentine over at IGN has really done an extensive write-up on this. Again, the things I covered were even things that she didn't, but I would claim maybe an egotistical statement, but between Engadget, myself, and Rebecca Valentine, that we've done a really good job of routing out the whole picture on this. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out. While I'm glad for the employees, I don't personally think this is like a super huge impact, them unionizing in Sweden, because everybody in Sweden is unionized. I'm actually really hoping that this summer we hear about Contraband, since we haven't heard about it since it was initially announced in 2021.
I kind of forgot that it was even a thing. Yeah. Yep. Very much so. Tom, any thoughts here? Are you ready to take your next news story, as we have talked about Apple in the App Store, not only in terms of their epic battle, or their battle with Epic, not necessarily an epic battle a few years ago, but we've had some other rumblings in terms of FCC, there we go, and some other pieces. But you've got the next news story here related to Apple opening up parts of their store.
Yeah, so they have made changes in its guidelines in the App Store, making retro emulators available globally, which is interesting. And an update to its app review guidelines, the tech firm said users can now download games from retro emulators that developers are responsible for ensuring that in quotes ensuring that software complies with guidelines and applicable laws. Of course, also they mentioned that excuse me, it also updated rules around mini games and mini apps. And I'm not sure what this app is, WeChat, stating that when used in apps such as WeChat, I've heard of it, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. They must use HTML5.
Yeah, I think WeChat is like I think I want to say it's like the Chinese version of like of WhatsApp. So it's like a really big
Okay.
social
That sounds
chat
what I
app in
know
China.
about it as well.
Yeah, messaging app. Okay. So yeah, so you can download these emulators now. Obviously, you gotta there's a bunch of gray areas within the emulation out there as it is. So I'm kind of surprised they actually even allowed it, but you can do it now. I just thought it was interesting that they're actually allowing this now, and I don't know if this comes from kind of the bigger thing earlier in the year where they had to change the policy to allow game streaming apps. Obviously, what you just mentioned with Epic and all that. Epic is trying to get back into their app store, and new changes to comply with the European Union's Digital Markets Act, the DMA. So, which allowed alternate app payments and app stores on devices. Excuse me. Now I can understand, obviously like an Epic or like say if Steam wanted to like throw their system on there, but this is obviously a little bit more in the gray area with downloading games and stuff, and you're not supposed you're not supposed to do that, and all this other stuff. But it was just kind of caught my eye that they didn't even allow anything like that on there. But I guess now you can. So, and obviously Android's had that for probably forever. I think since it's even since it first came on. I think I tried doing some like early on, but it was a little bit convoluted at the time. So I think it's a little easier now. But I just kind of fell on off of that kind of scene. But I don't know what your guys' thoughts on this is.
I think it'll be. I think, like, on the surface, I feel like, it's good that it's opening up. I think one of the interesting things in terms of what the longevity of this means, if there is regulatory or market pressure to continue opening up, like part of what Apple has been, part of its selling point over the years has been its closed network and the kind of security around its closed network. And the more that it opens up to some of this, how many other, does that open up additional doors that make the platform less secure than it previously was? And long-term wise, what does that do? So yeah, I guess on the surface, okay. But I wonder what the lasting effects will be. GameLogIQ?
So one thing that I think I will give Apple credit for is I don't think that Apple isn't doing anything where they don't know exactly what it is that they're doing. If we remember when, I want to say it was Canada who basically told like Facebook, Google, and like one other thing that like they were responsible for, and they were going to be held liable for like news stories that were allowed on their platforms. And so they said, okay, well, we just won't allow news on our platforms anymore. And so, then like their citizens started crying out, right? And those companies said, yeah, not our problem, your government's fault. And so I think, you look at what's allowed here now. And so first of all, just like Tal said, right, this all goes back to the DMA and Apple taking measures to make themselves compliant with the DMA. They've already had the EU come back to them on a couple of occasions because, they will do things like they will open up the App Store, but then say, okay, but now if you want to have your own App Store off of the App Store, we're going to charge you 50 euro cents for every install over 1 million. And by the way, updates to your application count as installs. So then it becomes incredibly draconian and really really profit impacting for you to do such a thing if you're an app that sells through really big numbers. And so, the incentive there is to only do that if you're really small, and then you're not really making, that much revenue anyway. So, and on top of that, now they're also trying to kind of maneuver to get out ahead of everybody coming after them, because everybody has seen their need to bend to be compliant with the DMA and kind of smells blood in the water. So Epic has been on them. Phil Schiller has directly called Tim Sweeney, right? And that phone call has actually resulted in, at one point, Epic having their developer license removed, right? So, and then they have lawsuits starting to spawn in the U.S. because the problem during this whole period has been, people have gotten happy about what they happen to see in the EU, but then I've reminded people, just remember, that's only in the EU. They have no open lawsuits in the US. They had one that was kind of swirling around and pending appeal with Epic, but the judge had ruled on that, and found that there were certain things developers could do, but he also didn't find Apple essentially guilty, and Tim Sweeney was unhappy with that. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do, because they're allowing emulators, but then you can't sell any software in the store. And so how are you going to get the game onto the iPhone? I guess you're going to have to do that through a third-party app store. So that means the emulator could be sold in the App Store, but then in order for you to get games, that's going to have to be done off the App Store. So why would you distribute the emulator in the App Store if you have to provision the games off the App Store? That means you're going to run your own third-party store. Now you're in, right, the draconian regime of paying Apple for, so, Apple's doing a really good job of playing games and saying, hey, we're compliant with the law. If you developer choose to be compliant with the law, please do and pay us more money. So, it's going to be interesting to see, what all becomes of this thing. And like I said, I think Apple's maneuvering themselves into a position where if things go badly, they will be justified in taking whatever draconian actions they need to protect their users, or be in a position to say, yeah, we told you this was going to happen, right? So, it's not our fault. You guys clean it up. So, like I said, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Good analysis. Good story. Hero Down Under, thanks for the the additional explanation on WeChat in terms of a social and commerce app. Appreciate that in the chat here. So, all right, gentlemen. Here we go. We got a question. Tim Sweeney. This does not work very well for a podcast, but it works nicely for video as we sit and read Wara's question. GameLogic, you got any thoughts here on this one?
Yeah, so Wara's question is, what do you think Tim Sweeney would say if I asked if I could add paid content to Fortnite but not give Epic a cut? Do you think this is a false equality? Yeah, so if people, just in case people don't understand it, and this is, I forget what story this was connected to, that I was kind of trying to talk some people through this. But one thing we should understand about Tim Sweeney, and I respect what he's trying to do, and quite frankly, I'm kind of rooting for him to a certain extent. But let's just be very clear. Tim Sweeney, that's right. This was in response to people thinking that the Epic Store was going to land on the Xbox. Let's just be very clear. Tim Sweeney does not want to share his revenue with any platform owner. So Epic isn't going to land on the Xbox in any relationship that requires Epic to give Xbox a cut of what it gets on its own store, right? So, and so kind of Wara's kind of asking the question, hey Tim, you're saying all this stuff, but hey, how about if I wanted to sell content in Fortnite? Fortnite is really kind of a UGC type of game to a certain extent, maybe. UGC type of games is kind of this new category of commerce-oriented game, business model game that, Minecraft and Roblox are in, where, UGC stands for user-generated content, where people basically can kind of sell their content through the game, which is essentially a store or platform, if you want to call it that. It's kind of how Sarah Bond refers to it. So, yeah, Tim Sweeney would say, yeah, get kicked. You're not going to sell stuff through my platform and not give me a cut. Although he would say, but my percentage that I'm asking you for is very, way more lenient than what these other platforms. But, it's not super altruistic. Tim wouldn't, tell you, he wasn't taking a cut of yours, but by the same token, Tim's not willing to share, with any of the platform owners either.
All right, let's move into our final segment here and rounding out the rest of things that we've been playing. Gentlemen, one of the things that I thought I was going to be playing this week was the return of Gigantic. So Gigantic Mojito, this was a third-person perspective MOBA back in 2017. It had early access on Xbox One. It closed down. It was in the kind of heat of the MOBA chase right before right as Battleborn and the kind of hero shooter aspect was coming with Overwatch in spring of 16. But then it shut down. And last fall, about October, that Gearbox Publishing had like a gigantic throwback weekend where they had Gigantic back. And then a couple months ago, Ark Games and Gearbox Publishing announced that it was coming back. So it is back on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, pretty much the way that it was. So I have picked it up, haven't had a chance to play it yet. So that will definitely be something that I'll be looking forward to. But I think I find it interesting that kind of the failed live service game, the MOBA chase from 5-6 years ago has found a new life to something. As we have frequently talked about on this show, games that have never quite hit enough of an audience to sustain themselves, even if it's had a popular or at least a dedicated fan base. Looking at Utah with what was the Knockout City, right? The dodgeball game, a couple other ones again. So interesting that it is coming back, and that Gearbox, which is freshly off of its separation from Embracer and its acquisition with Take-Two, that or 2K, excuse me, that it is being published here. So I'll be curious to see what that looks like and what type of community it needs in order to sustain itself. It is a paid game. It's $20 or $16 on sale right now. It is, so it's not a free to play with a whole bunch of microtransactions. It doesn't seem like there's actually a whole lot of microtransactions in it at the moment, which is another interesting piece in terms of what they will do. Tao, you've got another old game that is making your way into your rotation, one that you've picked up here and there, which is Red Faction Guerrilla.
Yeah, I was taking a little bit of a break from Hogwarts Legacy. Just needed something kind of crazy-ish to play, so I jumped back into Red Faction Guerrilla, all the destructibility of that game. So I'm playing that in the Steam Deck during my commute to work when I have to go into the office, so on the train. So, just I thought I had started this like back in the day, and even when I started the game, like I had my save, but I was like right at the beginning. So I don't know, it was just something funky happened with my save, and
Do you have it on Switch? The
I have it on, yeah,
remastered?
I
I think
have the
that's what I
remastered on
remember you talking
Switch.
about.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I have it on. I think Xbox Two was, well, I think that was the original one when I played before the remastered one. But yeah, I just had the regular Red Faction I had bought like back when it came out, when I still had my older computer, and I could barely run it. So I was like, well, I'll probably have a computer again one day. So I kind of just put it on the shelf, and now I brought it back out. So um, but yeah, just kind of running around. I actually made it through the first section of the game, which is basically kind of a tutorial level, or I shouldn't say level, but section, because it's kind of an open world game. As you progress and like open up, more areas, it kind of opens up, or liberate more areas. It opens up like more of the world or the map. So it's not all open to you all at once. So um, you can just do the story missions, or you can do just like destruction, like kind of, it's like a time limit kind of a thing, or help with raids where you're just like trying to take over one of the buildings of the enemies, and just kind of stuff like that. And every once in a while you'll get like, hey, there's a courier for the EDF that you have to intercept, and take them out, and get that information. Or there's a group that we've already liberated, or like a little section of the town that we've already liberated, but they're starting to attack it again, so you kind of defend it. So it's kind of cool that you get those kind of things that you can kind of distract you from the main story. But just got, like I said, got through that first level, or the first section, and kind of starting on the second section, which it's kind of an fairly large-ish area, that kind of tutorial area. But then the second section is like super big, like really huge. So, and I kind of forgot how big the map, once you kind of like unlock everything, I forgot how big the map kind of really is. So it's just kind of a fun, kind of a wacky, like we were talking before, Just Cause ish, kind of a game where you can just kind of fool around, and you get like, obviously you have your different weapons, and you can jump into vehicles and stuff like that. But one thing I forgot about is you can get backpacks eventually that gives you like kind of like different kind of powers, like super jump or strength and stuff like that. So, which was the multiplayer was kind of centered around those backpacks when it was out. I don't know if there's any even community right now, but I remember back in the day that was probably one of the more underrated multiplayer games out there, where you can kind of collect the different backpacks and stuff like that, and gives you different powers. So, kind of predecessor to Fortnite and stuff with its legendaries and mythics and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. I just never played anything like that before, but I haven't had a chance to check that out yet. If there's any kind of still community out there playing that multiplayer or not. So, but maybe I'll try to get to it this week. If not, but still enjoying the single player.
And this is one where it didn't like automatically update to the remastered edition. You're still playing the kind of PlayStation 2 360 era graphic game.
Yeah. You know what? It does look pretty good. I mean, maybe it's just because it's a Steam Deck. Obviously, it's only 720p, but it does look pretty good, even on the Steam Deck and even on this version. Yeah, it's not the remastered, because I mean, it always, it has that plastered on the, on the title.
Yeah, no, I just sometimes, like, I remember when Borderlands original did that, where they came out with an updated one, or the BioShock when they came out with their remastered ones, Steam automatically provided that. But again,
I think this is one where in your library it shows up as 2 discrete line items. Like, I want to say in my Steam library, there's like Red Faction and Red Faction Remastered separate. Whereas, like you said, a lot of times like BioShock will come out, and I'll have to actually go in and look and see, wait, did it auto upgrade to like infinite? But I guess it's just a matter of how they publish it to the store.
Yeah.
Makes sense. All right, well, let's move from one big map to another. GameLogic, looks like you're playing a little more Marvel Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, I'll be very quick because I know I took a lot of time in the news section. But yeah, went back to Marvel Spider-Man 2. I just played... I guess maybe I shouldn't say because I don't want to be spoilery. I'll just say I've just played a very big, major boss battle in Miles' story, which I assume is one of like the big boss battles of the game. I'm actually very thankful that I'm past that, and I hope they don't pull a thing in the game where you come back and fight that character again, like where they're more powerful, because that particular battle was a really big pita. So yeah, so I'm glad I'm past it.
Just makes me think about where Miles' story goes throughout that, and how it kind of segues into the kind of finishing out Peter's story. And yeah, that is such a strong game. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say I don't think it's a spoiler. I think it's a foregone conclusion that you fight the lizard, so I'm not talking about the lizard battle. I'm talking about one after that. Yeah. But yeah, I had a good time with, in an area where there's been a lot of chatter online about frames and performance on consoles. This is one where I continue to be super impressed with Insomnia. I played it in 1440p in performance mode, and I was really flabbergasted. I have to talk about that game and Gran Turismo that have, this game I think maybe has like 5 different modes. Gran Turismo has like 8. It's absolutely ridiculous. But more so, when you go into Spider-Man 2 and you go into the graphics options menu, it literally scrolls onto a second page because it is so PC-like in the choices they allow you to make to tailor the visual experience. And that's, like I said, a lot of people have gotten salty about 4K 30 and lots of other, that's important. But to me, it's really more so what I want is a PC-like experience that allows me to tailor it, right? I'm accustomed to the PC where I have bells and whistles and I can turn things on and off. This week the last week with the Call of Duty problems, one of the things I did turned off NVIDIA Reflex. So I just like having that ability to tailor the experience to what I want. You can pick the frame rate if you want, but what I want from console vendors and console developers is give me options and choices, right, to flip stuff on and off, because what I want to do is tailor my experience. I find that more valuable than, just the raw frames.
Yeah. It is, again, I'm just thinking back to my gameplay experience with that, and you're right. Like, there's so much kind of depth in those menus. So, all right, this hits the segment of the show where DB talks about sports games and GameLogic talks about Battle Pass first-person shooters, and Tao talks about Fortnite Battle Royale games. So, just to wrap up the final segment here, yes, it is my turn to talk about some sports games. Still playing MLB The Show. Actually finished out my first season in the Road to the Show. If you remember 2 weeks ago where I talked about playing Road to the Show, starting a female character, going through that narrative, got called up to the majors, made it through, had a couple really good starts, didn't get... didn't make the playoffs, but got a Rookie of the Year award, and it was kind of fun within the narrative that I crafted within the game. My character was originally from Albuquerque and was drafted by the Rockies, so her AAA call-up team was the Albuquerque Isotopes, so she got to come back, play in front of a hometown crowd before getting called up to the majors. And then playing through there, it still has the loadout pieces that it had for the past couple years with Road to the Show, where you've got like basically perks that you're adding to offset or to complement your breaking balls, your curveballs, sliders, your off speed stuff, your fastballs, or base running, fielding, batting. All those are in there as well, but it feels like it's doling them out pretty well. So as I went over I'm playing a pitcher, so not a lot of batting going on here anymore, and it is doling those out quite a bit, so that by the time I finished my season, I had moved my way up into kind of got called up in the high 70s, and then got probably made my way up into the low 80s within my first year. So definitely enjoying that experience playing through. I'm curious to see what happens. Reading about it online doesn't seem like there's nearly as much kind of agent trade stuff, or that the trades actually kind of come out of the blue, which I guess is potentially realistic as well. And then my other sport game that I've been playing is Madden 24, my online league with some friends. We are hitting our first playoff season with Madden 24 after playing multiple seasons of 23. Now that 24 is out on Game Pass and free. So just that is my churning away, kind of picking away at things while I'm not watching Fallout and convincing myself that I don't have 60 hours to dive back into a Bethesda open world game. All right, we'll let GameLogIQ take his drink and move us into his quick update here, or maybe not so quick update in terms of Modern Warfare 3.
Yeah, not a ton to report. Season 3 continues on. We must be getting close to Season 3 Reloaded here. I think that's on like the 20-something of April, maybe. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. Of course, I think they've had their, Get High event with Cheech and Chong in the game, and some of those, finishing moves, I guess, was the main special thing for them. We've had the King Kong content in there, and everybody's raged about, the $80 glove and the $100 skins. But I've been continuing to play it and have a good time with it. Been working submachine guns a lot this week, so I've been playing a lot of the small map rotations, the small map mosh pit. They've got a really good kind of bundle of small map modes that you can go into now. Like I said, you have small map mosh pit. You also have Grow House 24/7 and Emergency 24/7. So a couple maps have been introduced that I'm not a particular fan of, so I don't really like Tanks or whatever it is, which is like a map on an aquarium. And then I'm not a super huge fan of 6-star. Which is kind of this elevated, sky level map in a hotel. And by sky level, I mean it's one of those maps where you can fall off the edge. But other than that, I've been sticking to the small map rotation, and that's been a lot of fun as well as the regular map rotation.
Nice. And finally, with some Fortnite, Tao, take us home.
Yeah, and then real quick, going back to Red Faction, I did just check Steam. It does show both Remastered and Guerrilla on there, but I don't remember seeing both of those when I was installing the Steam Deck. So I wonder if Remastered's not verified, because I think I was just looking like at the verified list at the time. Maybe, I don't know. It seems kind of weird that Remastered wouldn't be verified if the old one is, but I don't. better graphics, I suppose. Maybe it's not there yet, but I'll have to check that out. No, going back. But yeah, Fortnite. I've been jumping back into Fortnite those last couple weeks, but this past week I actually jumped back into Rocket Racing and the Lego Fortnite. So Lego Fortnite had their big update 2 or 3 weeks ago, where you can make your own cars and stuff. So I was kind of building stuff up to try to do that again. And just like with the buildings, the houses and the different structures, you can either do like their pre-made vehicles if you want. Like they have like a racing one, transport one. I forgot there's a third one. I forgot what that's like a specialty that it does. So you can do those, or you can just make your own now, I guess, which is kind of cool. But I haven't got to that point yet, so I'm just kind of gathering my materials and doing stuff like that. And then with the Rocket Racing, they just did an update this past week, dropping a new season and dropping some new tracks. So it's kind of like a Neo Tokyo type of tracks, where it's a lot of mostly in the dark so far that I've seen, and then, a lot of neon and stuff when you're racing around. So it's pretty cool. So it's kind of nice to get back into those modes. So yeah, just doing those.
Nice. All right, gentlemen. Any other thoughts, comments for the evening before we head out?
The one housekeeping note that I wanted to make, I've been meaning to make it for a couple weeks. So it's great that there are so many of you guys who are regulars coming by the show every week. We have been podcasting for, I think, Tao, if we go all the way back to Casual Adult Gamers. Casual Adult Gamers, I would say, phase 2 of the podcast, which I don't think, DBQ, you were even around for yet. I think we've been podcasting for something like 14 years, and we've never had like regular attendees on YouTube, so that's been great. The one thing I will say is, just so I kind of close the loop on what's been going on. There are so many of you now, when the chat is so busy, it is impossible for us to get through the show in 90 minutes if we stop and mention every single comment that you guys make in the chat, which is what we used to do. And I kind of transitioned to that without telling everyone, but I do just want to say the mode we are in now is I am trying to bring up most, if not all, of your comments on screen on the live show so that people see those. And obviously, if they're on YouTube rewatching it, I almost always leave the chat and run. Not always, but I do try and bring them up. But I do try and bring them up on the screen, and then we are picking out individual things, like if there's a specific question or a specific comment that answers a question we had or something like that. So just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that and didn't feel offended if we don't kind of quote every single thing that you mentioned in the chat.
Yeah, it's a very valuable call out here, GameLogIQ. Thank you. And really thank you to everybody who's been having these conversations, not only with us in the chat, but with each other, right? Like part of the reason that we don't feel like I didn't feel like I needed to tonight is that you all are talking to each other, but really we appreciate the dialogue back and forth with us and with you. So for those of you that joined us tonight, Wara and Hero Down Under and Nate and Lloyd Metroid, so glad that you were here. Always glad to have time together with us, with you, and with each other as well. So this has been episode 334 for the week of April 14th. We'll be back again next week. Tao, you'll be taking over the mic as we head into the week of April 21st. So until next time, this has been DBQ Hams with GameLogIQ and Towmaster99. Play the games you love those you play with. Be kind to yourselves out there. Good night, everybody.